Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And under that umbrella of spiritual adventure, I am able to embrace a lot of different modalities that all help to serve us as human beings in our path towards growth. I've got a great guest coming on in a few seconds here. Just want to remind you all about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon rather. In there, you'll get some mundane overview of what's going on with the planetary activity that affects all of us on the planet. And then I break it out into the individual signs for each of the individual astrological signs. I encourage you to always read your sun sign, which is based on your day of birth, and then read your rising sign, which is based on the time of birth. And the time of birth can be found in your birth certificate, or if you can't find that, ask your mother. I'm pretty sure she was there. So without any further ado, let's get my guest on. Her name is Jeanne Mayell, and I ran into her through a good friend of mine who through the astrological community, and she's a professional intuitive author who gives private life readings and offers tools to help people develop their psychic abilities. In 2015, Mayell was named Coast to Coast AM Radio as one of America's most gifted tarot readers, holding master's degrees from the Harvard School of Public Health and Harvard Graduate School of Education. She has a background in counseling, in counseling psychology from Framingham State University, and is published in the Atlantic and other national journals. She is not only a gifted intuitive, but brings an academic and intellectual perspective to the world of psychic readings and intuitive training, much of which is considered to be sort of woo-woo by many standards, but her approach to it is very academic and grounded in a very firm commitment and belief in what these tools can provide. So, Jane, it's great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Thank you for having me.
So, before we get started, I'm really curious about what drew you to to tarot in particular.
Well, I had pursued a pretty mainstream career in healthcare administration, and then I had some life things that happened. I lost somebody really close to me, and it changed my perspective. It actually pulled me into the other world, the other side. Mm-hmm. I'd always been really creative, and this whole work is really a creative work. It's a what they call like more of a right brain kind of function, and so this was natural that I should go in this direction. And it just, what happened was my mainstream job just became unmeaningful to me. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I wanted to be more on my own. I didn't want to work for people. I didn't want to follow political agendas. I worked in the government and I at a high level, but I felt like I had to pursue what the politicians wanted, and I wanted to pursue what I believed and what I felt was right.
Yeah.
So I just lost interest in doing that other work. Very
admirable, and I can see how a life change could bring that to someone. Yeah. It certainly happened to me as well. I was drawn to astrology under similar circumstances. But when I think of tarot, and I have great respect for the tarot and what it can offer, I'm always struck by the sort of what I would consider random quality of it, because you shuffle the deck and then boom, a card appears, and all of a sudden we ascribe a certain meaning to that. And I wonder if you, in your view, see that as random, or if you see that as sort of the divine intervention of some sort.
Yeah, I don't see it as random, although for years, I'm a pretty hard-headed person. I'm a Taurus, if you're interested into astrology.
That's hard-headed.
Very grounded and hard-headed, and so it was probably 10 to 15 years into giving readings every day before I started to surrender to the idea this is not random. And there are a few reasons why. One is that I got to that point. One is that I taught classes, and we would all read one person, and I would have my students throw cards, and there was a non-randomness to the way the cards turned up. In fact, one of my students early on was married to a statistician, and she recorded like how many of the same cards we got in a given throw on one person, and took it all home to her husband, who calculated the statistical odds that would happen as being like over 1 in a billion. And I am, being in the health sciences and the social sciences and having gone to gotten master's degrees, I understand statistics. I understand how they work, and I believe in them. I do. There's always the 1 in a billion chance that something was actually random, but when it happens over and over again, you become convinced. Then, years later, I started teaching the science behind ESP, and I began to understand that we're talking about quantum physics. And in quantum physics, which is really, in a sense, at the base of this universe, of the physics of the universe that we are part of, that we are energy. It is these what seem to be random events can actually happen. That there is something called non-local communication and non-local contact, which just simply means that we can read and feel each other from a distance, a great distance, and we do, and we are all related. We're all connected. So, how does that tie into randomness? It's I just want to put it this way, that most of what's going on in our consciousness and in our interactions with each other and in this universe, our brains cannot wrap our heads around it. Mm-hmm. We can't think in this level of dimension, of this kind of dimension. We can't. So it doesn't make sense to us. Doesn't feel rational, but it's true and it works. And the other thing I'd say is that so many times I've given readings over and over again, which turned out to be correct, that I would see what would happen in the future, and then it would happen. Now, it's even more clear to me because I started about 10 years ago, I started documenting visions of the world on my website. And I did it, like I would read the future about, the U.S. or about, the weather or climate, and I'd put it up on my website, what I would get. And the reason I did it was because I wanted to track it. I wanted to see, was this really coming true? Because when you read an individual, and I've read thousands of people, they don't always get back to you.
Right.
You don't always know what. The only time I really have a good record when reading an individual is when I read myself or my kids, right? People I'm very close to.
People you can track.
I follow that.
You can track.
Yeah, I can track it. Mm-hmm. So about 10 years ago, I started. Actually, it was around 2010, so it's like 7 years ago, I started putting my visions up on my website. And at the time, I only got like 1 or 2 hits a month on my website, and now I'm getting about 2 million a year, and rising rapidly, really fast. Why? Because people are seeing that these are coming true, and that's teaching me and my students, because a lot of this was a teaching tool for me, tracking their visions as well. They're coming true. And now, it seems now, actually I'm getting a little off track of your question, but we just want to say that it just seems now that the amount of energy, information, consciousness that's coming to me is just constant. It's like a fire hose of light coming down on this planet. It isn't just coming to me. It's raining down on the entire planet. And anyone who is open or who trains themselves to be open picks up on it. And it's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing, and it's understandable. But yeah, so I guess as far as picking cards and the randomness of it, at this point, I can believe that we're guided by our senses, not our hard brain head, not our logic. We don't think about what card we're going to pick. Right. Our bodies pick it. And if you understand mindfulness, the whole movement of mindfulness, and if you understand how to be psychic, which is what I teach, you realize that psychic energy comes from our senses, not our head, so to speak.
Right.
And so our senses know, our sense of hearing and sight and smell and sound and the feelings in our bodies, those are the direct antenna. Those senses are the direct antenna to the present moment and to the energy that swirls around us. So it makes sense that we would unconsciously shuffle the deck and pull out the right card, because our nervous system is doing it, not the hard drive in our brain. That is a limited part of our brain that's used for everyday survival, right? So we can not trip over a cliff and fall in and die, or that we can pick the right foods to eat that won't kill us. That part of our brain is filled with data, and it's based on memory and trial and error and rationale, and we couldn't survive without it, but it doesn't have any creativity in it, and it is not psychic. And so there's another part of our brain that is really operating from our senses, our present moment, attention. And that part is what's picking those cards.
So these antenna, that makes perfect sense to me. These antenna to which you speak of, which are sort of like the senses. The senses are these antenna, and the more you are aware and attuned to the value of frequencies that these antenna can pick up, the frequency of them, the more you can tap into this predictive quality, which is actually the sixth sense, if you had to put a word for, if you had to phrase it that way, correct? It allows us to bring in that sort of quality that says there's a certain degree of knowing that's going to happen as a result of our actions and our senses and our abilities to do that.
Right. Well, and interesting, but they call it a sixth sense, but in fact, it's the five senses as well as emotion, and also just a pure awareness. Right. And it's using the five senses fully. So it's kind of ironic that they call it a sixth sense when, in fact, if we're just using all of our capacities, our five senses, and then our emotional sense and our awareness, if we use sight and sound and smell and taste and touch, if we use them fully, then we have psychic awareness. So it's just using them fully. That's all. And people who practice meditation and mindfulness, you were talking about, developing a capacity. Those people are really psychic because they spent more time training their senses and working with their senses. Exactly. They can walk outside and go, instead of being up in their head, think about, I got to do this today, I got to do that tomorrow, or, just thinking too much. They are smelling the air. They are like an animal, like a dog would. They're feeling the breeze on their face. And it's not only does all of that mindful awareness make you happier and more, it also increases your alertness, your all of your faculties. It has so many effects. Mindfulness, I'm sure you probably talk to people about that too, and you're a meditator. So that has tremendous effects on your health and your awareness of the world, and it also makes you extremely intuitive because you're trained to focus through your senses. And your senses are the receptors of what is underlying sort of this intangible revelations that we receive through the form of a prediction or a tarot reading or whatever, correct? I mean, these are Yes. So when I teach people how to be psychic, I teach them, we do a lot of meditating, short, brief meditations. I teach them basically what is Vipassana meditation, which is meditation through focusing through your senses. Now, the reason the tarot is so popular and such an easy way to be psychic is that it uses, first and foremost, it uses your eyes. And it doesn't just use your eyes, but when you're a beginner, you look at a picture, you pull a card, you look at a picture, and you're using your eyes to go, in a sense, you might say into your right brain. You're using your eyes to stimulate your imagination, and you are now seeing the world through your sense, through your visual sense. And since we as humans, if we were bats, we wouldn't be big on the eyes, but if we are since we're human, eyes are really probably the most prime way that we see the world. If you're blind, you're going to use something else. You're using sound and smell and others more. But main thing is most humans really do rely on their eyes. And so it's an easy way to look at the world through your senses if you're looking at a picture. Now, if you really get good at the tarot, and the way I try to teach it is I ask them to feel when they look at the picture, not only what are their eyes seeing, but what are they feeling in their body? What else is going on?
Interesting. It's a fascinating discovery, and you think that given today and our current climate and environment that we live in, where our eyes are so actually working overtime, does that discourage this kind of practice, or do you really have to work to overcome that?
You mean
These cell phones and screens and all the other kinds of
oh,
visual stimulation
right,
that we have. I mean, how
right.
do we sort of counteract that, or how do we? I guess we just got to put them down. That's just all there is to it, right?
Definitely, technology interferes with psychic awareness.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. You go if you go to a meditation retreat, they some of them require and others just beg you to put away your cell phones because it stimulates your thinking too much. It's too many voices coming into your head that are not your own. Too
Right.
many words and voices, and also reading is extremely distracting from feeling your senses because you're reading words which are in effect letters are hieroglyphs, and if we read them as hieroglyphs, like the A is a hieroglyph for connecting heaven and earth, the way it starts
Right.
at the bottom, goes to the top, but we don't read it that way. We read it in terms of how we were taught and what those words mean, and it's a total distraction from your senses, from your feeling senses.
It puts new images in your head other than you conjuring up
Right.
your own or being able to pick up on those that are around you. So the primary foundation that you have for your tarot is founded in the meditation quality of what you can derive from your senses, pure and complete, right? That's just the most genuine way to describe it. It is a absorption of yours, or heightened awareness of your senses, that allows you to it clears your space. It's like antennas, if we think of it that way, and then the energy comes through our ability to sort of tap into this sort of collective subconscious. Is that a better way to describe it, or is that an accurate
I would
way?
call it the collective conscience, our subconscious, You're tapping into the swirling, ever-present consciousness around us. It's also present throughout the entire universe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's science on that now. There are people who are studying consciousness as a fundamental component of the universe, along with spin and charge. But you're tapping into the collective conscience. And the nice thing about the tarot is, you might just deduce that, well, if that's all it is, Jeanne, then how about you just stare at any picture at all, like stare at tea leaves, because tea leaves are visual, and you look at them and you conjure up a vision. You might see like a palm tree or something in the tea leaves, and people give pretty good readings there. But the difference between, say, staring at tea leaves and staring at the tarot is that the tarot has archetypes. It has, depending on the deck, it has wisdom in it that's been handed down. So, you're looking at an image, you're getting a sense feeling about it, and at the same time, there's knowledge, there's information. If you learn the tarot, you don't have to learn it. You could just use it as a bunch of pictures, just like tea leaves, and you can. And I always start my classes by teaching people to look at it as a bunch of pictures, because I want them first and foremost to connect through their senses with what they're looking at. But after a while, if you decide to stick with it, you can learn some of the meanings of some of these archetypes, these super symbols that have been handed down since before recorded time, like the symbol of the moon and the stars and the symbol of death and the symbol of the mother and the father and the priestess, which is intuitive. And there's many such symbols in the tarot that represent old thinking that's been handed down. And why has it been handed down? Because it's true. It's basically myth.
It's myth. I was just going to say it's mythology.
Yeah.
These are, when I think about astrology and how we have repetitive cycles, which is in line with some of what you're talking about, we're sort of speaking from some sort of footprint in some area. We talk about the cycles, and the cycles are. It's basically time is a helios, I say, which is like a giant corkscrew, so that things may recur, but they recur at different times. So we are basically living the same lives people lived thousands of years ago when mythology first came into light. We're living the same lives they led. We're just living it in a different time and place, different context. So there's that sense of continuity.
Beautiful idea.
There's that sense
It's interesting because when I first started giving readings, I was just playing around with it for fun. And we had a roommate, my husband and I, we had a baby, and we had a roommate who's still friends with me, and this was 30 years ago. And she used to bring these interesting people for dinner. In fact, she brought some pretty famous people for dinner, like Joan Borsenko, who is the sort of goddess of forgiveness. But she'd bring these people for dinner, and I always felt a little shy with people. I'm extroverted, but I still always feel like, geez, who are you? I don't know you. Right. And so I would throw a card or two on them and tune in to them that way, and that way we would get connected. I wasn't doing it professionally, I was just doing it that way. And one of the things that I noticed in the beginning was that I would see these people in terms of kings and queens and princes, and, why have all these ancient stories, like Sleeping Beauty, and which goes way, way back, and Oedipus Rex, all these different stories, why have they survive? Because people like to think of themselves in terms of kings and queens and princes, and they like to think of themselves in terms of these ideal archetypes, and that's what's in the tarot. And what was wonderful about it, I noticed this in the beginning. I don't think about this as much anymore, but what was wonderful about it is we kind of crawl around on the earth, especially in this day and age, and we just think we're nothing, we're nobody, we're just one of millions, and who cares about our lives? But in fact, if you can see your life in terms of a great king or a great queen or something epic, something large, then it takes on another light for you. You become important in a good way, in a positive way. You take yourself seriously. You take your journey seriously. It's like the tarot talks about the hero's journey, right? So you're the hero of your life. And I love that idea that we the court cards themselves actually are all, like in a regular playing cards, they're king and queen and prince and princess. So it helps us to see our individual journey as an epic journey.
And I think that's important because the definition of a hero is obviously varied, because some people are more heroic than others. They achieve a certain status that others don't achieve. But the thing of the basic core of what you're saying, I think, is that if we regard ourselves as heroes, we then espouse ourselves, we ingratiate ourselves with a sense of self-love, which then brings us to a higher level of appreciation, and may actually increase our ability to, receive psychic information.
Yeah, and also it helps us to strive. We're here, I don't really know that I could say why we're here. I certainly can tell you intuitively why I think we're here. I think we're here now. This is an unprecedented time on the earth for anyone who's alive. We've never had a situation ever since humans have been on this earth that we have now. Never. We've never had 400 parts per million. It's actually over that now, carbon in the atmosphere since humans were alive. This is a whole new ballgame. And so why are we here, and why were we ever here? Why was anyone here? To grow. I mean, if you think about just the human life process, it's always about learning and growing and evolving. So if we think of ourselves in terms of a hero's journey, and we identify with the ideals, the Platonic ideals on this earth, the kings and the queens and the great ones, then we want to evolve. We use them. We relate to these people who have done heroic things, who have evolved, and that helps us. So it gives us, in a way, it kind of gives us a mother and father. It gives us people who have ascended beyond what normal humans have done, and that's great. That helps our whole race evolve. That helps us survive as a species, and it also helps us do more than survival. It helps us to actually improve, which, if this Helios idea is correct, which I believe it is, we are trying. We're not just coming full circle, like a circle, as existence being cyclical. It is not only a circle, but it moves forward. That's
at the same time, yes. It's like we're on a stream, so events may recur, or similar types of events may recur, but once they recur in a different place and time, then they are completely different because the context is different. We are living in a most unusual time, but I would argue, I think, that there probably is precedent for this in the past. There has been other times when I'm sure we thought the world was coming apart. I mean, at the outbreak of World War I, I'm sure we thought the world was coming apart. When the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, we probably thought, my God, the world is coming to an end. That's not to discourage or disparage where we are now. I do believe we are in a very difficult place right now, but I also think that we are living in a sort of a parallel, like a pendulum kind of existence, where the pendulum does swing from one side to the other in this dualistic world in which we live, whereby we sort of swing one direction dark and then we swing back the other way towards the light. I believe that there's that certain sort of sway as part of the universal structure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought too. That brings up for me, which is the movement of evolution, of how we evolved, because I think that we evolved by swinging from one extreme to the other, but it isn't like just back and forth. It is corkscrew. It's like, it's like we are we're going around and hitting the extremes. And right now we're hitting the extremes of a kind of patriarchal dark negativity at the same time, like this whole administration, the politics that are happening right now, and the way we're headed. At the same time, we're all that when you hit bottom, in a sense, or you hit one negative side, then it causes you. It's like diving into a swimming pool and then jumping off from the bottom to springboard you back up. Now, at the same time that people are like, oh my God, can't believe we're doing this to people and that this is happening. At the same time, that's causing this beautiful positive movement of caring and love and spirituality and volunteering and charity and people standing up for what they believe. So it's like almost like as sand is pouring down, like in a time capsule, or as water is going down a drain, something's coming up at the same time. So this is a really interesting time of opposites happening.
It is.
And this negatives and positives.
I guess this serves, our time that we're living in now serves as a catalyst for the other, because if the roof did not leak, I think I've mentioned this to you before, if the roof did not leak, we would not fix it. So we know that the roof is leaking in our world. And so we've got to fix it. We're not going to sit there and get hit in the head with a drop of water while we're trying to sleep. If our roof is leaking metaphorically in many ways, and so this is the prodding factor that forces us to make a change, and it is the driving. So in many ways, we could say, if we had to be optimistic, which I ultimately am at my core, I am an optimist. I believe that this was a necessity to happen in order to wake us up, to prod us, because otherwise we had become complacent, we had become inured to it, we had become apathetic in some way. So this is a wake-up call of the highest order that drives us to take action for our better good at our core.
Yeah, it's great. And the work that we're doing with intuition, and like with the tarot, for example, is actually waking up our intuition, which is really being here, being alive, and feeling the world as it is. We need it. A lot of people are coming onto my website because they're scared about, well, what's going to happen, and what should I do, and where should I go? There's no way to understand how this will go. And so maybe that's fear that drove them in the first place. But at the end of the day, they discover something extremely beautiful, which is a greater awareness of the world. And, we got really mired in data. It was a good thing. Science was, 1880s was a huge scientific revolution, and people were like drunk with scientific discovery, and we thought we have solved all the problems ever in the world back in the 1880s. And now we're coming almost full circle. We're saying, well, science is great and we need it, and I'm glad we have it, but we can't, it's not going to help us at the expense of intuition, at the expense of using our senses and awareness, of human individual awareness. So, there's now, I think there's a revolution in intuition now. And it goes along with mindfulness, and thank God.
Yeah, thank God is exactly right. We're talking today with Jeanne Mayell. Her website is jeannemayell.com, JeanneMayell.com, Jeanne Mayell. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. In the meantime, I encourage you to check out her website and see what's going on over there. She's got a wide array of interesting stuff, and she's a fascinating character to begin with, and you'll reap a great amount of intuition and ideas from her. Again, it's Jeanne Mayell. It's JeanneMayell. Mayell, one long word, JeanneMayell.com. And we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes to continue our discussion about some of the predictions that we see coming up on the world stage through the eyes of Jeanne. So hang in there. We'll be right back.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Hello and welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher, and I got a great guest on today. Her name is Jeanne Mayell. Her website is JeanneMayell.com. It's JeanneMayell.com, for those of you who didn't get it the first half. And we're talking about tarot and its predictive qualities and what a wonderful tool it is for those of us trying to make sense out of this disorderly world that we live in. And it is truly a valuable tool. I think of it as a sister or a brother to astrology and numerology as well. So they're all drawing on the same sort of ability of our heightened senses, as Jeanne had mentioned in the first half. And one of the things I want to talk about, Jeanne, is we have a lot of information on your website about predictions, not only for the planet, but for our country, for what's going to be happening in the world. And I'm wondering, how do you use tarot to derive those kinds of predictions? Do you ask a specific question and the cards deliver an answer, or is it just what's your process?
Well, I use a lot of different processes, and one of them is a timeline process that I learned from a teacher that I had many years ago, David Hall, who's no longer with us, but he was a wonderful psychic. He didn't use the tarot as much, but he did teach me that you meditate and call out the time, like January 2017, February 2017. Okay. And you simply go with whatever vision, thought, feeling, intuition comes to you. Mm-hmm. And some of my students use cards. They'll just pull a card and they'll see what comes to them when they look at the card for that month. I personally have used it as a meditative type of reading. I meditate and see what visions come and what feelings come. The tarot, it was reading the tarot that got me good at just simply reading without the tarot, because I got much more aware of what I was feeling when I threw a card. So that's one way of reading the future, and that timeline is what is so popular on my website, because it's easy to teach people how to do it, even if they don't know cards or anything at all. I just get them to close their eyes and see what they get, and we put it up on the website. Most of them have no clue what they're seeing. They say, well, I see something. They tell me what it is. I write it. I put it up on the website, and they're like, what does it mean? They don't know. And then as time goes on, they start to see, oh, my God, that was absolutely accurate, what I saw. So that's one method. Another method that I use a lot is when people ask me, what is, these are all mostly political kinds of questions. So what is Robert Mueller, who's the current investigation director, what is he thinking? So I'll throw some cards, and I find the cards really helpful for reading people, reading their mind, reading what they're thinking. And so I use them for that, and that, I did a recent reading on Robert Mueller in that way, and I saw, I saw things. I saw he was going to end up taking his investigation into the Justice Department. That was like 3 weeks ago, and now, a couple of days ago, he says, I'm taking the investigation into the Justice Department.
Interesting. Wow.
So, the tarot stimulates, I'm trained to read the tarot to read people. And because I give personal, private, one-on-one readings, that's pretty much how I make my living. And so I'm good at that. And so that's how I use it when I'm reading the world. I ask to read people. Now, I can also read large numbers of people with the tarot. I can say, what are the people of the U.S. feeling about this election that we had? And I can throw cards and get a group feeling. Because if you can read one person, you can read a group. And however, as far as the timeline is concerned, like what's going to happen over time, I find that I like to just use meditation and calling out times best. I can use timelines with the cards. I do it one-on-one. You can do it, actually. I have done it for the whole world. And sometimes I do it calculating numbers, like 20, like when 12/12/12 happened, the December 12th, 2012, everybody was like, whoa, what's going to happen? So I threw cards, I got the Hanged Man, and I did a reading on our world and how the whole world feels, and right now about where we're headed. And that was an amazing reading, because I posted it as a blog post, and then I think it was the next day or the day after, what I had said was we have gotten to the point now where things are happening beyond our control that are out of our hands, and we can't stop a process, and it's extremely painful for all of us. And we're going to have to learn from that, and we're going to go through. And the tarot it has like a timeline for, as I said, the hero's journey, but the hero can also be a whole civilization. So we were at 12, I said, which is the Hanged Man, and then the next year would be the Death card, and the year after that, the Devil, and then the year after that would be the Tower. And those were all like dark night of the soul feelings. And I said, well, we're going to go through a lot of hard stuff for the next few years. Well, the next 2 days, we had that horrible Newtown tragedy.
Oh, gosh.
And all those little babies were killed. And
terrible.
People were crying all over the world. People who were Republicans, Democrats, all countries, everyone was sobbing, because we all love the innocence. We all love our babies, our children. And so it was like what I was seeing was real and was true and was going to happen. And then so I use the cards in a sense in that way to predict where are we at in our civilization all over the world, and where will it lead. And the interesting thing is that you can track it and follow it and see that after the hardest stuff happens, which is the Tower card, then after that there's we break through to a new, happy, beautiful new rebirth.
And it's a step it's a building step at that too, because the hardship hardens ourselves and gives us the strength to withstand, and therefore as a result of withstanding and evolving, we sort of step up the ladder another notch. It's kind of like climbing stairs. And we do the same thing in astrology. You cast a chart for
a theme or an event, and we can see where things will be happening. So there are definitely similarities there, and very, very many people who do astrology will also do an adjunct, either palm reading or tarot or numerology at the same time. So they're all very closely connected. When you look at these. When you look at cards, do you see cards as having a dualistic quality? In other words, there may be a dark quality to that card, but there's also a good quality.
Yes, it's the, what do we think of it as, the exalted version, the most highest possibility. It goes between two polar extremes.
Okay.
And so here's a good example. So the Emperor card, I got that as a soul card for Donald Trump, and I also got it as a soul card for the Dalai Lama. Now, those two people couldn't be more different. And yet you can look at it, the Emperor, and you can look at the Emperor and see it as the exalted version of a great patriarch. Takes care of his children, his family. He cares about the poor and the sick and the weak. He builds things. He builds, civilizations. I don't think the Dalai Lama doesn't build civilizations, but he's built a whole kind of worldview and a teaching that has gone all over the world and helped a lot of people. And so you can see that, and then you could look at, and I'm sure the Dalai Lama himself has a dark part of him. He's not all perfect. He's got his kind of silliness or whatever it is he does. I don't even know. He tells us he does. I don't know. And then you can look at somebody like Donald Trump, and you can see that part of him that is very angry and hateful, and you can see it in the Emperor too, because the Emperor is a patriarch, but he can be cruel and he can be harsh and he can be sort of all or nothing in the way he's thinking and sacrifice people. And again, the individual person that you're reading, say Donald Trump in this case, has a good side, has a positive side, has a caring side, the way he feels about his daughter, for example, and people he loves. So, the cards all vary in that way. And what's really interesting is when I'm teaching a class and I will do this exercise where you figure out what your soul card is, or what is your card of the day, your card of the moment. Everybody will pull cards. And so let's say this has happened. 3 people pull the same card, and we'll go around the room and read that person and that card, and people will understand and begin to see that their view of the card changes depending on the person they're reading. So they'll see the Emperor in a totally different light depending on the person they're reading or their situation. Yeah, so, these are symbols. I call them super symbols. Other people call them archetypes. The reason they're so powerful is that they have so many multiple meanings, and that their meanings go along a spectrum.
And they're
very,
all
very
part
dark
of
to
us.
very, very light.
Each of us carries these archetypes in us. I think they're part of our collective pool. When you look at that collective pool of knowledge, we all are in that same pool, and we're going to have the sharks in the pool, as you mentioned, and we're going to have the beautiful dolphins in that same pool, using water as a metaphor. But when you look at someone, as you mentioned, what you wonder what makes a person act a certain way. I mean, obviously they have perhaps a tragic past or history that got them to this place, and the quality you speak of when you speak of the two, Donald Trump and the Dalai Lama, being polar opposites. Yes. But they both share this sort of emperor quality, which is the potential to do something. And that potential and how it is manifested is up to the individual. And some people would choose to exercise that in a positive way. Others would choose in a negative way. And I wonder if there's because they are both have this dualistic quality, is there a way to turn that in a person, do you think? To reverse it, to reverse it. Do you think that that's possible? In that a person,
of course. I think the key is, I just came off a loving kindness retreat with Sharon Salzberg at the Insight Meditation Society in Barrie, and we spent the whole week sending love to all kinds of people we loved, people we didn't love, people we felt were mean and horrible, and people who were beautiful. And what happens when you focus on the people you don't like is that you're doing it in meditation and you're sending love, is you start to see their positive self. You start to see that
Right.
we're all originally were babies. We all are trying to do the best we can. And usually when people are doing something horrible, it's because they're stuck in a kind of defensiveness. They're trying to defend themselves, and they think that being angry or hateful or even striking out at people is a way of protection. And so underneath, you go deep down in, and you see a really vulnerable, scared person.
Right.
And so, in my view, love is the only force there is. There's love, and then there's the fear. It's fear.
Love and fear.
Fear is a kind of lack of love, or fear, or protection.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. So and the tarot can reflect that too. The only thing is that the tarot is only as wise as the person who's throwing those cards. The archetypes will help you, but you can, if you're yourself are not very highly super evolved, if you're still working through a lot of stuff, a lot of fear stuff, you can read something in a pretty negative way, which is why you should be really careful who you go see for a reading. And I'm sure it's true of astrology too.
It could be misconstrued, but that's the responsibility of the person who's doing the reading. But
exactly.
Interestingly enough, I got into a rather heated discussion over the last several weeks about a conversation similar to what we're having. And my comment was that I actually felt sorry for Donald Trump. I said, there's a part of me that feels very, very sorry for him. Not because I like him. I don't like him at all, and I'm fine saying that. But I see how flawed of an individual he is and how damaged he is in order for him to react the way he does. So in that regard, I have sympathy for him in some part of me, which I think is okay.
Yes, it's more than okay. I mean, we did this thing on the retreat where we started with people who were challenging, but not too challenging. But I got to the point where I was sending him a lot of loving kindness and hoping and sending, and not only him but some of the others around him, sending them the prayer that they would learn to connect to everybody, that their hearts would open. And I definitely feel sorry for him. It doesn't mean that I want him running our country or would condone some of the stuff he's doing. No, but that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is understanding the person and seeing why they got the way they were, and starting, and understanding that ultimately we're all doing the best we can. I've done some pretty bad stuff myself. I've had some pretty negative thoughts. I've yelled at people on the highway. I've I had my own share of.
Well, we all have
perfect
that.
We all have. That's what's wonderful about the symbols and archetypes being polar, going and from extreme negative to extreme positive. It helps us to accept the human nature. Accept us.
And accepting, and that's warts and all. We have to accept ourselves, warts and all, because otherwise we can't get beyond that, and that's just a human quality. But let's get to some of the juicy stuff. I mean, I want to talk about, and not that we haven't had a juicy conversation already, but I want to get to some of the predictions that you're there that might be interesting to the people, because we do see ourselves in a sort of we are coming to what I would consider to be some sort of a crescendo of sorts, where there has to be, we can feel this pressure building, and then there's going to be this release of some sort. And I'm wondering what your views are regarding that, and how, I do firmly believe that we are headed in the right direction. I've always felt that way, no matter how dire things look. I do believe there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow somewhere, and I do think it's on its way. Not that it's going to be perfect, but it will be better, and we will evolve better as a result. But I'm curious what you see sort of in your predictive eye of some of the things that we have on the news lines, the headlines today. Like you mentioned Robert Mueller, for example. What's his...
Well, so the way I can be the most accurate in my predictions is to use the timeline and have lots of other people use it and see bits and pieces and scraps of information going down into the future, going off into the future, and then step back and look at what I'm seeing. And what in the overview I did a reading about 4 or 5 years ago on a retreat where I saw all the way to the end of the century.
Wow.
And I know, it was pretty wild. I was on a retreat, and suddenly you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to sit down and meditate on the future. But it came to me, and I felt like there was a voice inside that was saying, "You write this stuff down." So I did. And what I saw then, and then I keep seeing similar things, is that we are going, overall, just an overview, we're going into descent right now. It's like the dark night of the soul. And like it's in the tarot. And we're going down, 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 down. And we're, we're seeing some pretty ugly stuff in human nature. All this stuff like no more political correctness. We're going to ban people from coming into the country. This racism. There's all this horrible stuff. We're going to pull away from the right to free speech. We're going to, I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better in terms of treating each other well, and anger rising up and hatred rising up at the same time that I'm seeing that. So short-term predictions, well, I think that by December of this year, the Congress is going to be hotly debating what to do about the president. So right now they don't talk about it. They don't want to look at it, except for the Democrats, but Republicans don't want to talk about it. But something's going to happen with this investigation that's going on that's going to cause them to have to really take a look. And I'm saying that it's around December, but it could be. Time is not easy, so it could be give or take a few months. Then I look at impeachment. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. I feel like starting around, a little bit after that period of the hot debate, I feel like he's just going to squeak by, not get impeached. But the fact that there probably will be a vote is pretty huge. And then around a few months later after that, I start to see people in the Trump team who were very close to him actually getting exposed, fully exposed. It's no more just guessing or speculation. And it probably is going to come from this federal investigation. They're going to actually lay out some things. And I think that after that, I feel like, and this is from lots of different readings, after that, I don't really see much of Donald Trump anymore. I don't know why. I think probably he's going to take a back seat. I don't think they're going to impeach him, but I think he's going to get quiet. And I don't know exactly. He's just going to either because too many people close to him, really close to him, are in such serious trouble that even he can't deny that. I just think it's going to knock the wind out of him. And after that, I start to see Paul Ryan, like starting at the end of the 2018, 2019, the whole Capitol building becomes really large in a vision that I've had. So, and I start to see Paul Ryan. So I'm thinking, it looks like the Congress is going to start to take on the president. Sort of fades somewhat, he fades,
right.
And I don't see much coming from Pence, although I did see a lot of religious right stuff starting around mid-2018 to the end of 2018, and I thought, that brings up Pence a little bit. So there's the voice of the religious right starting to have more power, and then there's the Capitol building having more power, and then there's Paul Ryan having more power, and then, so, a lot of people think, this will be the end of the Republicans if Donald Trump gets brought down. No, not at all. It'll, in fact, if anything, it feels like the Congress gets more power. It's a Republican controlled Congress. I also these are predictions. I'm always a little careful. I like to be a little careful.
Right.
I feel really positive and solid about the overview of what the general direction of things, the way things are going to happen, which I'll explain to you. But the specifics, like, the midterm elections, I still think there will be a Republican-controlled Congress after that. I could also say, I know people are going to say I'm biased. Maybe I am. But I feel pretty strongly that the election 2016 was stolen, not just from gerrymandering and from some of the more obvious ways, voter suppression. But I think that the polls themselves were tampered with. The machines were tampered with. I've said this now for a long time. Now there's this evidence that the Russians were trying to tamper. I don't know if they did, but somebody did. I feel it. I felt it all along. So I think that's going to happen again in 2018 and in 2020. That's my view. So the long term, though, the very, very long term, before we run out of time, is that there is going to be a surge of positive, caring energy that's already starting. And by 2025, it's going to be a whole new, shift in this country.
Yeah,
by 2028,
I feel that too.
it's going to be, unbelievably We're going to catch up with climate change. We're going to become a leader in the world in climate change, in sustainability. It's really like the end of an era, starting, in the 20s. It's going to start to end.
It's sort of like I mentioned, that it has to be that this is sort of a catalytic period where this is the catalyst for that drives us over the edge. Interestingly enough, though, when you mentioned Paul Ryan so prominently, he is a third in command. So if something did go wrong in the administration where the president and the vice president were hindered in some ways, he would be the natural person to assume the power. So that's just an interesting.
And then the question is, well, what happened to Pence? I don't know.
Who knows? But I mean,
he just doesn't show up very much when I'm reading, so it's hard to say.
We saw Nixon and we saw Agnew, and we know what happened back then. And so here we are again in a cyclical pattern, which is interesting, I think, through the eyes of astrology. But I do think that overall, all of these predictions, I think, are valid, and they come back to that initial point that we were talking earlier about this sort of this pendulum swinging, and it only swings when it gets so far, then it has to come the other way. This is sort of the nature of life, and sort of all of the archetypes that we've been mentioning, that you've mentioned, I think have been a part of a human continuum that has begun since the time began. This is just part of what our DNA is made of. This is how it's part of the human condition. I think that's just the way it is. And the stories that are told and the people who populate our lives are part of the players in this gigantic, long-running play. I mean, this is the play that just will not quit. And all the references to mythology and all of those things, they keep recurring through time, where just the needle drops down in a different groove in the record. That's really what it comes down to. And we are evolving in that manner. And we have to be circumspect about this, because without the rain, we don't have the sun, as we well know, and vice versa. So we sort of have to just grin and bear it, I think, and make the best of it getting through, and hopefully see that it brings us to a greater place in the end of the whole thing.
I believe it does. I'm very optimistic and excited, actually. I don't feel worried anymore. I mean, I've had my moments, but not anymore. I feel really optimistic, and I also think that we're going to really surge upward in the way we handle the earth and climate. I think we are. You know? There's going to be damage, which we've already set in motion, but there's also going to be a kind of beautiful saving, a
healing quality.
Healing,
And and all the things that you mentioned about sort of the shape of the planet and where we are going and where we're headed, those I think can also be applied to us individually as people. We can also look at our lives through the same sort of lens. If people are out there having a hard time right now and they're struggling in certain parts of their lives, wherever that may be, there is hope at the end of this, because this is a test. This is how character is built. This is how we learn our lessons. This is how we grow and evolve. We walk through the mud for a while, and then we're out of the mud and we're on our new way. And it's just one of those things. It's a fact of life. And anybody who's ever endured any sort of tragic experience, you can see sometimes that they come out. There's a choice as to how you will come out of those situations, and you can come out of them in a positive way, and you can come out of them in a negative way. I would encourage you to try to take the higher road, because you certainly will find that in the long run you have learned and built character as a result of that hardship. So it's a fascinating discussion, and our time is up pretty much, but I do want to point again to your website. My guest today has been Jeanne Mayell. She's a fantastic professional intuitive and author who gives private life readings, and I encourage you to go do it. I have done it myself. It was a very fascinating experience, enlightening, and I'm very positive and very encouraged by the things that I learned and have learned in my journey with Jeanne. Her website is Jeanne Mayell, JeanneMayell.com. And I encourage you to go there and sign up for her newsletters and see what she has to say about what's going on in the world, and sort of be circumspect about where we are now. Yes, the rain is falling literally here where we are in Massachusetts, but the rain is falling on our earth right now. But we know that the rain must fall, and that sooner or later the sun will come out, and I do believe it's on the horizon.
Great, and come to my free classes, because I can teach you how to read the future, and then you can become part of the whole website. That's right, yeah. And all that information is on your website about how to do that and when to go for the classes, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get a notice when we do a free online class.
Okay.
And actually, the title of my website is Peace, Prosperity, and Intuitive Wisdom. So the goal there is for all of us to evolve and to become more at peace.
Mm-hmm. And we will do better as a group rather than trying to do this by ourselves. There's no question about it. So
Sure.
that's great.
Thank you.
Well, Jeanne, thank you so much for coming on today. It's always great to talk to you. I enjoy your optimism, and I enjoy your strong intuitive ability, and your enthusiasm is really contagious. So I thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. It's lovely coming on.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.